Welcome to the Meat News. We are meat obsessed, Wagyu focused, source driven, barbecue influenced. I'm Evan.
I'm Tyler.
Sweet. And today we are joined by Reid Martin of Lone Mountain Wagyu. How you doing, Reid?
I'm doing great. Excited to be here and looking forward to getting into all the meat of Wagyu and what Lone Mountain's about.
Nice, man. Well, we are talking today because at the American Wagyu Conference, Association Conference that we were at about 2 weeks ago, you won the best Wagyu steak in America. So congratulations for that.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was such an exciting night, and we were just thrilled, to be picked amongst some great competitors, and it was really one of the more exciting kind of events in my professional career. So
Dude,
Where's
that's
couldn't have been happier.
your
that's
trophy? I thought it'd be like hanging on the shelf behind it.
Yeah, my trophy is not with me right now, actually. That's a good question because that thing should go with me wherever I go, but it's down in Southern California right now, and I'm in Northern California, so we're in different locations, unfortunately, for the pod.
Hey, no, I get it, man. It's like the Lombardi Trophy or the Stanley Cup, man. It's got to make its rounds a little bit first,
Yeah.
you know.
Well, it's got to make its way back to the ranch, I think, in this
Yeah,
case, and on a mantle of the owner's house. So that's the plan for it.
nice, man. Well, let's talk a little bit about Lone Mountain Wagyu, and we're gonna, of course, talk more about the conference because that was fun because we got to judge and MC that and get to see all the steaks behind the scenes. But before we get into that, man, talk about Lone Mountain and where it's at and what you guys do.
Yeah, so Lone Mountain Wagyu is kind of the culmination of Lone Mountain Ranch and Lone Mountain Cattle Company, which are located in north central New Mexico, about 45 minutes southwest of Santa Fe, on the Turquoise Trail and the Ortiz Mountains. It's like a really beautiful high desert landscape. The ranch is over 6,500 feet elevation. It's over 27,000 acres, so it's about the size of Manhattan Island, which is a cool kind of comparison. Bottom line is, you don't want to break down on in one corner and have to walk back to the headquarters. It's going to take you a few hours.
Absolutely.
And it's been in the family of Bob Estrin and his family. His wife's family actually bought the ranch in the mid '60s, and it was a commercial cattle operation for about 50 years, 40 years, and I guess before that it was always a cattle operation. So it's got a long Western history, old fences made out of materials off the ranch and that kind of stuff. And basically, Bob came in to help his mother-in-law with the ranch, and he was working with her and working with conventional cattle, and he had a culinary experience in Santa Monica with Wagyu in the early 2000s, and it just totally changed his life forever. I think maybe
That's
similar to what's happened to you for you guys. Yeah,
yeah,
he's a real pioneer, as you guys have gotten to know some of the pioneers through this process. He's an early Wagyu guy. And then that's where it started. And we produce full blood Wagyu cattle on the ranch. We sell bulls, embryos, semen, heifers, and then we market the feeder cattle through our beef brand, which is Lone Mountain Wagyu, which was kind of my biggest role in the business, and is still to this day,
yeah. So
which
what
is
is your
the beef marketing. Yeah.
what is your role in your title there with Lone Mountain?
Yeah, so I'm the COO of both the Lone Mountain Wagyu business and the Lone Mountain Cattle Company. So I sort of oversee all operations, and I have a great team. I work closely with the ranch manager, Rio DeWitt, who takes care of most of everything on the ground at the ranch. And I work really closely with my coworker, Sid, who does like customer service and all the logistics of the beef delivery system. So I'm kind of involved in both. I was hired nearly 10 years ago to run sales for the beef company. And then over time, it's a very small kind of group of, it's a very small business really in a lot of ways. And so I kind of morphed into a new role where I'm able to like utilize my background in the cattle business, along with my background in beef and beef sales, which we can get into as we talk.
Yeah, nice, man.
I gotta say I was impressed when we were watching Dr. Phil break down that half steer, and there weren't a whole lot of people talking in there
No.
knowing every one of those cuts, and it kind of made me. It was a little bit of an eye opener for me. My background as a 30-year chef, whatever, and
Share.
butcher. Uh,
Yeah.
it was kind of interesting that a lot of those ranchers there didn't know what kind of cuts he was pulling out like right off the bat until he explained them all. But
Yeah.
I was impressed with you because you knew exactly what was going on there.
Yeah, I've worked in the beef industry my entire life, and like a lot of the people in the room, I grew up in the cattle side of the business, and as you guys know, I'm sure there's not a huge divide, but there's kind of a division between raising cattle on the ranch and what the beef business actually is. And so I worked for a grass-fed beef company for about 10 years before I worked for Lone Mountain. So I have a pretty deep background in box beef and food service, retail scenarios, and different niche kind of marketing categories, which I know you guys are both very familiar with your shop. And so it's been nothing but excitement working for Lone Mountain and being part of the Wagyu world for the last 10 years.
Cool.
Nice, dude. Well, man, it was cool. So at this conference that we were at a couple weeks ago, the American Wagyu Association Conference, so we got to judge and see all of these amazing steaks that everybody submitted. So there was about 18 submissions from all over the U.S. And we were going through it with Dr. Bass from the University of Idaho, the meat scientist, getting to see every single one. So we were pulling out every single one and seeing just how beautiful this American Wagyu is. And it was really interesting. You know, he was even saying, I've never seen things like this before. I think this stuff's off the charts for me. And I thought it was a really cool moment for American Wagyu,
Yeah.
because people associate American Wagyu with not being real and being just, false or just a scam. Like we talk about that all the time. But it was really cool because out of, 18 of these steaks were just completely just marbled and beautiful and well raised. And so I guess, out of those 18 steaks, why do you think yours stood out a little bit?
Well, I didn't get to see the raw product. Obviously, like you guys got to evaluate, which was a really great opportunity, I think, to see the contrast between the different
It was
producers and the different steaks obviously exhibited. I think for us, why our steak stood out, and I think as we know, won the day, and we're excited to have that belt for the year. Is it's three things, and it's something the three things that we always think about when we think about beef production, which is the genetics, the feed, and the nutrition part of it, and then the environment and the husbandry aspects. So you bring those three things together, and this specific primal that came from this specific carcass was just like decades of intentional breeding, and this is the culmination. It was a heifer. She was really outproduced her contemporaries in a lot of ways. The digital marbling percentage ended up being over 66% on the Japanese MIJ camera. So that's like way into like the A5 sort of
Yeah,
level of marbling.
yeah.
So I think that to hear that Dr. Bass was even surprised to see that kind of level of volume of marbling is not surprising to me because it's not the standard kind of American Wagyu steak you're going to see. Now, we routinely will get into the 40s, even 50s sometimes. But to be honest, we average more around 36 to 37%, which is quite adequate. And if you look at our website, you can see pictures of these kind of steaks. But yeah, that was a really unique piece. And I also think that the fineness associated with the marbling on that specific carcass was really off the charts. I can't imagine what the tri-tip looked like, what the flat iron looked like. It's crazy.
Don't get tired of those tri-tips, man. He's gonna
You
start
know
going
what?
off.
You know what was funny is that when we first started with Dr. Phil, he had pulled out pretty much the USDA prime plus kind of digital pictures, and I was
Grading.
like, we can't. These are going to
You
be
can't use this.
completely off that chart, dude. We got to pull up the Japanese BMS rating and go off of that. And there were like 3 or 4 crazy standouts, and yours was definitely I was off the chart, dude. It was
Yeah.
unbelievable. The
Well,
webbing was insane, and it was like you said, it was straight up like looked like A5, man. It was unbelievable.
Totally. Yeah, that was cool. I mean, I actually, when we were thinking about what we were going to submit to the competition, there was one piece specifically that I think about to this moment, like that was closer to like 50%, so like 15% less than that one, or 15 actual percentage less, not I guess like 20% less marbling than that one. That was like from a more perfect carcass in terms of like the weight, the eye muscle, all those things. So it's like, we could have submitted any number of them, but I just happened to put like kind of a really crazy marble one into the competition. So maybe we'll fool with it next year a little bit and do something that's like more about the confirmation of the entire thing, and, maybe more in like sort of our crosshairs, so to speak, of what we're looking for. But yeah, that was a really special piece. And I think that, one of our customers was there actually at the conference, a friend named Yerbo. I don't know if you met him, a gentleman he's a member of the organization, and he actually bought the strips associated with that carcass.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I met him.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was like super cool to be in the room, and I'm like holding up the trophy, and we're talking about the steaks that won, and I'm like, that guy actually bought them and sold them to his clients. So it's kind of a cool, just like a full circle kind of moment. And I was just glad to share it with all my colleagues. And it's such a team effort to put all it together. It's like not one person does this stuff, right? It's the people who came before us, and the geneticists and the ranchers who had the kind of the wherewithal to put these combinations together, that is helping us kind of reap the harvest that was sowed by the early founders of the breed, and using technology to improve and never just staying the same. It's a big part of us.
I talked to that guy about the New York strips, and he actually started pulling pictures up on his phone and showing me.
Yeah.
And he said he sent some pictures back to his homies in Japan, and they were like, "No way, no way! That is just." They were just mind blown that that's an American product, So
Totally.
That's
I think
dude.
that's definitely starting to be a more bona fide vision of the world. Is that the United States are creating amazing animals?
Yeah, let's debunk, whatever
Please.
convention we've been at. I mean, I guess this is a good time to talk a little bit about our philosophy, right? Which is like, when I first started working for Lone Mountain, again, I have a cattle background. I grew up in Northern California on a ranch. We had a dairy. My parents are still there. My younger brother is running the operation as well, and so it's deep in my soul and in my being, the cattle business. Obviously, we all know about crossbreeding and the benefits that come from that. Heterosis, when you bring in two parents that excel at different things, you can get a great combination. And it's a super important technology that's been, developed over 50, 100, 200 years in the US. But when I talked to Bob, the owner of Lone Mountain, about our business, and I said, why are we not crossbreeding? We know that there's big benefits economically that come from this. And he's like, well, why would I take one parent that's superior at meat quality and breed them to another parent that's inferior?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, because, growth,
Yeah.
disease resistance, like there's lots of different things that are positive that come out of it. But one thing that's not positive that comes out of it is higher quality beef. So what he was about was breeding the best to the best. And that's why we do full blood beef. And that's why our beef stands out, because we're not taking the road of maybe economic viability necessarily with the breeding. We're taking the road of producing the best Wagyu steak in the US,
Yep.
which we did. And we're going to continue to do that. And I just think that it's so, it's so intrinsic and important to our story, this idea of breeding the best to the best to make the best. And we can just continue to do that. We're going to be fine, and we're going to be very competitive with the best beef that comes out of Japan and Australia, because we have a lot of, the same things available here.
Yeah. Hey, can you define the term American Wagyu for me in your words?
Yeah. I mean, I think American Wagyu is a pretty large tent, so to speak. It pretty much, at its basis, it involves all cattle that are the offspring of at least one parent that is purebred. Now, purebred is a little under 94% Wagyu content, right? So if you have a purebred bull and an Angus cow, that makes beef beef cattle that can be marketed as Wagyu cattle and beef that can be marketed as Wagyu. That's the American Wagyu standard. Um, so to me, it involves a whole wide kind of variety of levels of quality, of rearing practices. I mean, as you guys know, grass-fed Wagyu cattle in the U.S. could be considered Wagyu as long as they have the appropriate content of genetics. And so when we think about American Wagyu, we think about a very kind of not a large industry, but a growing industry that involves a lot of different qualities of beef, a lot of different production methods. And so very early on, before I even worked for the business, our point of differentiation was to be full blood, not to be American Wagyu, but to be full blood Wagyu beef. And so that's what we've been pursuing of. And as you guys have learned through the Authentic Wagyu program, that's something that the people of the association and the members of the association want to have, like distinctions between the different kind of levels of quality, which is well understood. So we basically just said, we're just going to do it ourselves and, talk about it in our branding. And I still don't think that it resonates with all consumers because they're like, what is that necessarily? But once you start to get into it a little bit more, it becomes a known thing that like full blood Wagyu is produced in Japan, it's produced in the US, it's produced in Australia, it's produced in other countries in Europe. And that is different than just Wagyu influence beef cattle and Wagyu influence beef. And the reason that is because like when you have a F1 animal, which is like, let's just say, for example, an Angus cow and a Wagyu bull, a full blood bull, let's say in this case, then what you're going to have is you're going to have about 60% of the calves are going to produce near the average between the two. And then about 20% will perform more like the Angus parent in terms of the beef quality, and 20% will perform more like the Wagyu parent. So the idea that you can't have like really outstanding F1 beef is not true. You can. And the idea that all F1 beef is going to somehow be, even superior to Angus beef is not true because there's a lot of outcomes. Yeah.
Yeah.
That
You're
makes
right.
sense.
So how do you think that, okay, one of the big questions I think we get is that, full blood Wagyu raised in America is not full blood. Like people think that because it's not raised in Japan, right? So they associate that it being 100% has to be from Japan. So how can we raise full blood Wagyu in the United States? And what's maybe some of the differences between full blood Wagyu in Japan and full blood Wagyu in the United States?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I didn't really give you my total background, but I actually lived in Japan for 2 years after college. I worked as a teacher in Western Japan, and I learned some Japanese. So I had like basic kind of now my skills have deteriorated a little bit. Getting older, you can see my beard. Time takes a toll, but the etymology of the word, right, is like Wagyu. Well, wa means of Japan, and gyu means beef,
Beef.
or beef cattle, in this case, cow. So it means Japanese cow, right? So like black Wagyu is like Japanese black cow. So yes, some people would say that if it's a cow in Japan, it's Wagyu. Well, I think we can all get to the bottom line, which is that Wagyu has been a breed in Japan for a long time. The history goes way back. They've got records, the nose prints, parentage, all that stuff. So all of our cattle are traceable to black Wagyu cattle that were imported and are DNA verified, DNA traceable. And so we have every pedigree of every animal that we've ever produced on our ranch. And like I said, it all is descendants of cattle that were originally in Japan and then were imported live to the US or exported live to the US. So I think that for us, the fact that we're full blood means that we never involved any genetics that were not outside the breed. And so we can, verifiably call our beef full blood Wagyu beef. And that beef is genetically whatever it is by the parentage, but it originates in Japan. So it is more or less chemically the same as the cattle would be in Japan or in Australia that share that heritage. And so that's how I would answer that, I guess, which is that, sure, the definition of the term kind of means cow of Japan, but now it's a breed just like quarter horses are a breed or Angus cattle are a breed, which originate obviously in Scotland. And so like there's, breeds come from somewhere. So we're in the era of, the Wagyu genetics, and Mr. Shogo Takeda was someone that really wanted to share the genetics with the world,
Mhm.
and he got a lot of flack from people in Japan, from ranchers in Japan, farmers in Japan who were like, "What are you doing?" And this is a story I heard. I don't know if it's not hearsay, I don't think, but one of the reasons why he wanted to share it with the world is because he would give this yogurt in it was like a Australian style like Greek yogurt, and he loved it. And they didn't have it in Japan, and he was like, "This is ridiculous. I want to have this." Right. So his belief was that Wagyu should be for everyone, and that they shouldn't gatekeep it, which I think is like pretty awesome.
Heck
But
yeah,
also like, yeah, kind of like crazy. He was kind of punk rock a little bit, to do
love
that.
it.
Yeah.
It's
So he shared it with Australia and the US, and there was other people involved, obviously Jerry Reeves, amongst others that were even at the festival, at the conference.
Oh yeah.
And so that's pretty cool that we're able to like still connect with the early people in the US that were involved with bringing those first cows over, and pretty
Yeah.
cool.
That's
We're
cool.
gonna try to make it a festival next year, but
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, that's cool
Definitely.
you're in Japan, man. Let
Yeah.
me ask you this. Would they call an Angus cow that was being raised in Japan, would they call that Wagyu because it's a cow?
No, they would call it by the breed. It would be Angus, or the big breed in Japan outside of Wagyu is Holstein, which I grew up on a dairy. So we had Holsteins. We still have Holsteins, and actually, as you guys probably know, being in the meat business, the F1 cross of the full blood black Wagyu with the Holstein produces like a pretty incredible eating experience. And so a lot of the best F1 beef that comes from Japan, which is marketed as F1 beef in the export markets, is actually a Holstein Wagyu cross. Yeah, which is delicious.
absolutely.
There's so many crosses, man. And it's so I want to go back to something that you said. You guys submitted something with a marbling score or marbling percentage of about 66% to the Wagyu conference. You said you generally do, you have about 35 to 40% is kind of your base range usually. And
That's our
so
average. Yeah.
that's your average. Okay. And I like talking about all these different types because I think that there's so many different types of people that enjoy different types of Wagyu.
Hmm.
So yes, you can get, like I would say, yes, submit that 66 to a bunch of Wagyu connoisseurs that are like, want the best of the best. But for like my parents or just, every Tom, Dick and Harry out there,
Yeah.
I mean, they would want something.
Sure.
I know I'm trying to use more Western terms that Tyler's teaching me.
Yeah. That's
Um,
good.
I think that 35 to 40 is such a great range for
Totally.
people. I love to kind of explain that there's so many different types. It's not always just the 66% because that's going to scare the hell out of somebody who's just like, I've never seen that before. I don't know what it is. But
Yeah.
with Wagyu, I love that there's so many more options right now with the purebred, our full blood purebred F1 cross. There's crosses between black and red now.
Yeah.
There's so many different types. There's grass fed that you could do. So you could have an F1 black red grass fed Wagyu cow that's probably going to be amazing and a totally different eating experience than a full blood, black Wagyu cow that, it's hitting 66% marbling. There's so many different things and just in beef in general. But I think a lot of people believe that, when you say Wagyu, you just get that A5 experience and that's it. But how like what's your experience with Wagyu? How many different types of Wagyu have you experienced? Have you seen with your Wagyu beef travels?
Hmm. Well, I think that, to be honest, like us submitting the 66% stake was a bit risky, because I think that for your very point, Evan, that it can be a bit polarizing when it's that rich. And in fact, often at these Wagyu conferences in the U.S., not I've been to Wagyu conferences in Australia. I've never been to a Wagyu conference in Japan, but
Yeah.
they talk about it less in Australia. But there's a lot of talk about, oh, this steak was too rich or too much marbling, and it doesn't really land with me specifically because I work with like three Michelin star restaurants that are expecting that kind of level of quality for like the small bite at the end of an incredible meal, like at Smith in Chicago, where you're doing a tasting menu and you're going to have maybe a few ounces at the end of the meal. So like, um, first of all, I think that when it comes to food service and Wagyu, there needs to be a real congruency between the producer and the operator, the restaurant, right? So the restaurant often has a better idea than like us producers do in terms of what their customers want, right? And
Yes.
so, for example, we sell to a restaurant in Chicago called Asador Bastian, which was named one of the best steakhouses in the world, and they do like a chuletone, which is like a Basque style, um, thick bone-in strip that they cook over charcoal, hardwood charcoal, on like a Jasper type of range or a grill
Yes.
rather. And so they've got Holstein dry age, they've got Rubius Galegas, they've got Lone Mountain, they have Australian Wagyu, they have sometimes F1 Wagyu. They have a lot of different breeders, a lot of producers. So I think that when you think about beef as being like a celebration, similar to like wine, and so it's like I like wine. I'm a wine person. Like I like I like Nebbiolo, I like Pinot Noir, I like Cabernet Sauvignon. All these wines are totally different from
Yeah.
each other, right?
Yeah.
And just like these different versions of Wagyu are quite different. Now, some of
Right.
them are more similar probably than others, and I'll give you an example of that. Like our Lone Mountain Fullblood Wagyu beef, which is the only beef we produce, is probably like kind of a dialed down version of A5, or some people taste like the Americanness of it, which is like sort of that beef forward flavor, that idea that I'm having a steak, as opposed to like the really kind of popcorny sort of fat you sometimes get with an A5 that's super clean, but doesn't really like have a super long finish. So we actually did. We've retailed Australian Wagyu from Robbins Island, which is produced in Tasmania, on our website. We've sold A5 from Hokkaido, from Oni Farms in like central Honshu. So we've done like some pretty deep research on how it eats, and all of it's great. Like we love A5. We love A5 with like a little bit of rice. It really works super well with the meat and the fat together. That's a big tip I would give to your listeners, is to try rice as a starch, white rice, like Japanese white rice. It's not more Japanese style white rice, usually grown in California, for as a side that you eat the beef with. And when we were doing all this research, one of the conclusions we came to was, wow, the beef we produce is actually what we like the best, because it has this sort of interesting combination of, like I was saying, that kind of robustness, that richness that we associate with like even Angus beef in the US, and the fineness and the tenderness and like the silkiness. And as you guys know, the fat quality of the Wagyu is so heralded because it's more monounsaturated and it doesn't cloy, it doesn't stick. So it like works super well with like wine, for example. So like a lot of chefs like to use it for, wine dinners. But I have one story that I want to tell you. I grew up in this like really rural western Siskiyou County ranching community near the Oregon border, about an hour south of Ashland, Oregon. And it's all cattle. It's like cattle and alfalfa. That's pretty much the only crops. And then timber. And so I had some friends who watched my kids during the county fair for an evening or whatever. And so I sent a steak to them, as Steve and Dusty Nash. I sent them a tomahawk. And then, a few days later, or a week later, I kind of follow up with them. I'm like, how'd it go? Well, she was like, "Oh, it was great, but ooh, a little bit too much beef for me and Steve." And I'm like, "For you and Steve, it's a 42-ounce full blood Wagyu tomahawk. Like that should be shared with like 3 or 4 people minimum."
Ha
And
ha.
they were just digging into it like it was a regular ribeye steak off the ranch. And I thought,
Yeah.
okay, there is education that needs to be done,
Yeah.
but I guess that is part of the consumption of it, right? Which is like I never have like a 16-ounce Lone Mountain steak by myself. I always have that with my fiance or with friends, because you don't need to have a whole pound of it to enjoy it. And in fact, it may be not enjoyable to have too much. So I would say that sometimes people are seeking that F1 experience. Sometimes they're seeking that Angus experience where they're having a big steak, like a prime rib or whatever, that is a large portion, that's pretty lean. And then other times when they want to have that more decadent, kind of more, roll your eyes back in your head kind of experience, that's when they're going to trend towards full blood and even imports like Japanese A5. But
Yes,
they all have their place. They're not like they're not they're where they are. They're exclusive of each other. You can enjoy all these things, and so I'm a big proponent for thinking of it more like bourbon or wine, where it's like there's not one right answer, and they all kind of serve different purposes. And variety is this spice of life, and we should embrace variety, and we should embrace disparate experiences that are interesting.
for sure.
I like that, man. And how do we do that? Because wine has done a very good job, and they've been established for 1,000 years longer
Yeah.
than Wagyu, basically, especially in the United States. And so there's so many great educators out there for wine. People understand it. When people see a $2,000 or $3,000 bottle of wine, they're like, "Wow, that's cool. I might not be able to get it, but
Mhm.
that's cool. Maybe one day I can celebrate with that." When you see like a $400 A5 tomahawk, people are like, "That is stupid. That's fucking insane." They go
Right.
crazy, like they're like, "How could anybody spend that much money on anything?" And I
Yeah.
understand that they are different, but there's so much education that needs to go into the Wagyu industry. So where do we start? Because I want people to understand that to start with Wagyu, you can buy a $10 F1 Zabuton steak that might just blow your mind. You don't need to buy $100 tomahawk. But where do we start with that in your mind? Like, how do we get to that point to start moving in the same direction as wine?
Well, I mean, actually, I think I'll push back a little bit because I don't think that people know as much as we think they do about wine, even at this point. And in fact, I would argue that some of like maybe the domestic production and even the international production has become a little bit regressive in terms of the quality and producing something that's really satisfying initially, but then kind of doesn't leave you with much to think about. AKA like the fruit bomb or these really ripe wines that are kind of like satiating, but don't really do much for you in terms of like really exploring your palate, etc. So I think the most exciting thing about beef is that people may have preconceptions about Wagyu, about it being expensive. And you're right, that might cloud their experience, whether it's be like, wow, that was incredible because they know that they spent $150 on it, right? But if we're able to, so this is kind of a very exciting debate within the industry and within the Wagyu community, which is like, we have a real opportunity to create this space where people go to Wagyu and they think this is going to be awesome, right? Because they have experiences back to back to back. And so there's a lot of people that are very concerned about subpar product being out there and people getting disappointed in a like let's say an F1 experience where it's like that was not great. It wasn't that different than the Costco steak that I'm used to or whatever. So I'm not going to do it again. Forget about that and just move on. So I think that it's like restaurants can be a huge help because they take the preparation out, right? And so I think we can all remember moments where we have this like transcendent experience with beef, and we've also had bad experiences with beef in a restaurant. So that's often down to the producers, what beef they put into said restaurant. It's not usually the restaurant's fault for not make a steak perfect, but if it's not a great steak, then it's not going to come across as great. So I think that we just need to keep on like raising that bar, not watering it down, and just pushing quality across like the whole spectrum of Wagyu, which I think that we're doing. We're improving. Like at Lone Mountain, we're improving. I think a lot of people in the industry are improving, but we need to continue to set expectations and meet them with the consumer. And I think restaurants are a huge part of that. Retailers, e-tailers, like what we're doing, Lone Mountain's doing, Snaker Farms, all these different companies are online selling to people so they have access to it. A lot of people haven't had access to it, in some markets because it wasn't common to find it in a restaurant or in a grocery store. And so I think that we need to, keep the standards high and just keep moving the quality forward. We're going to have customers that really enjoy that. Now, beyond that, I think that like the health aspect of Wagyu is so important to share because
Yeah.
that's something that people really don't know about.
Oh,
Similar to similar to a lot of things as it relates to nutrition that we're just kind of we're not super clear on. Even us sitting here talking about beef, I don't know everything about everything. I was just telling you how you should eat rice with beef because I like that. I think it's a great combination. That's a culinary one. Now, some people would say you should never have grains or whatever. So there's always differing opinions. But I think one thing we can agree on, which is so exciting in this moment, is that Wagyu beef, especially high content or even full blood Wagyu beef, is going to deliver uh, chemical kind of fatty acid profile that is just superior well, first of all, to other beef, but we're not trying to pit us against other beef, but even just across protein, right? So I think that's super exciting. And it also contributes to the eating quality, which is a really interesting kind of conflation of things, and is also just like almost hard to describe why it even happened, right? And so it's like super complicated, and people don't know that much about fatty acids still, and so there's a lot of education there for sure.
Totally.
I agree, man. And I think, when we say quality, I want that word to mean more than just marbled, because I think we
Yeah,
say that a lot. We're like, this is high quality, but like an F1 cross that has been well raised and has all those health attributes to it and is very tender and is marbled is a very quality steak too. So I think, what does quality mean in the Wagyu industry? And maybe
right,
can we make it work? Can we make all be on the same page with what it really means? I think someone's over here saying, "Oh, it's A5 because it's the most marbled," but
right.
someone here might say, "Well, actually, this is a better steak because you can eat 12 ounces of it and it's got great fatty acid profile and it's very tender."
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it comes down to the two factors that all the breeds are looking at, which is, palatability in terms of tenderness, and then like the succulence and the mouthfeel. So if the steak's not tender, like that's just like not going to work, from a Wagyu standpoint, because we are the tender breed, right? We're the marbling breed, but we're also the tender breed. So if the beef's not tender, I think that's a sort of somewhere you need to get. Now, is every steak going to be perfectly tender? No. And like we've talked about, there's cuts that have different attributes. And, we donated top round for the conference a year ago. And the chefs at the property we were at did such a good job. They used the Alto Sham, roasting it to the perfect temperature. And then it went out to 250 people after it had been sitting in the hotel pan or whatever for
Right?
45 minutes. And it was just like, it wasn't a great tenderness eating experience. It was a round steak. So like
Yeah.
we have to like also qualify where it's coming from. What does that mean? And this is a part of our challenge, like with brisket. So we sell almost all of our brisket to like a company that makes snacks with it. And then we sell some of it on the website. But like we're not going to penetrate necessarily like Texas barbecue because they have a recipe that's dialed with their
Mhm.
Angus product that works super well. It's bending, the pole, and ours is going to shrink more, and it doesn't work well for that. So we have to kind of find our spots too, I think, as it relates to the greater beef industry.
Man, yeah.
Agreed.
That's a
A
that's
lot
a
to
good
think about.
that's a good awareness there too, because it is, and that goes back to being, there's so many different types, so many different styles
Yeah,
of cooking and of beef, and what does Wagyu work the best with? So yeah.
yeah. Well, we sell export ribs to one retailer in Chicago every year, Paulina Meats in Chicago for the holidays, and they retail standing rib roasts of our beef. We do not sell prime rib on our website. We sell whole primals to chefs, obviously, but I think that's an example where if someone wants to have that, awesome. Spend $500 to buy a standing rib roast from Lone Mountain. But for me, I would rather take that and do a smaller format, more in my yard, broil on the charcoal. There's this great, the like cone row like style with like hardwood Japanese charcoal. Like that's the way I want to consume it. And if I'm going to consume larger format, like the tomahawk, we talked about the bone being maybe kind of a gimmick or whatever, but that's a really fun way to consume a larger part piece with a group where everyone is going to get some char, everyone's going to get some rare. And so I think that that's a sweet item for full blood and for F1 Wagyu. Whereas maybe, choice and prime have an advantage on like a rib roast, for example. in terms of the value for money. Because if you're spending a
too. Yeah.
couple $100, it's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Is it gonna make that big of a difference at the end of the day?
yeah.
So, you know,
I
and it,
think that's why it's our duty as Wagyu producers to try to seek the best
yes.
possible outcomes for the beef. Um, and that's what we're always striving to work with the best restaurants. And we work with a distributor in the Bay Area called Creamco that distributes our beef for California. And we have such amazing restaurants that are working with the beef. And it's like, that's where we need to be, because those are the people that appreciate what we're doing, the science, all of the tech, the history, the kind of artistic
The story.
aspect of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I want to make sure that we're, constantly evolving that way and, being used in the highest level.
Cool.
That's great, man, because you're right. I mean, people, if you are a new, it's a lot about preparation, right? So if you're a new cook and you're like, oh, I'm going to buy this Wagyu rib roast for $400, and then you screw it up, you're like, yeah, man, Wagyu's just not that good. I thought it was going to be better, but it wasn't great. Well, it turns out, you're just a bad cook, and so you shouldn't start with something like that.
Right.
And so you could have got a better value. You could have spent $100 and done the same thing, and it would have been maybe just fine, because in your mind you're thinking that this is a $400 or $500 piece of meat that is going to be amazing, but it is a lot about that preparation. And that's why I always feel like we push a lot about starting with those small steaks, so people don't spend $60 to $80, because that's a lot of money for a lot of
Yeah,
people for a steak, that's going to feed one or two people. So it's
definitely.
the education about the preparation. We always say that zabuton, which I know you like, is that that starter drug, that gateway drug into Wagyu, because you could buy that steak for $8 to $10, $12, and
Mhm.
grill it up and be like, this is amazing. I've never tasted anything like this. And that might get you to, start on the next one. Okay, well, now let me buy some Terrace Major. Now let me buy the New York Strip. Now let me buy the ribeye and let me share it. But like on your Wagyu journey, you're learning about all these things, and you're not just buying a full blood ribeye for, who knows, a big, 2-inch cut for $80 and eating the whole thing and going, God, it was just too much meat. I'm not a big fan of Wagyu.
Right. Yeah, you need to buy appropriately, I think, and I think that if like in terms of how we detail our stuff, like I think we're pretty thoughtful about that. We've got like different sizes for fillets, for example. So if people want to do a 6 ounce, they could do that instead of an 8 ounce, which is a nice option. But in terms of the utilization, I think that like some of the cuts you're mentioning, Evan, the zabuton, the terrace major, the flat iron, like people still don't know about these things. They're learning from people like you, to like seek these cuts out. And a lot of people have those cuts available. But as an industry and as a breed specifically, I think that we need to do a better job of merchandising the round, because there's a ton of meat there. There's a ton of opportunity to utilize different techniques. And I think that for us, it's still difficult to do a break so we produce like 30 head of cattle at a time, right? It goes through our processing facility in Omaha, small facility that's family run, very, very cool. We are able to do our camera work in there. They're super great. And we're able to like segregate the ribeyes, the New Yorks, the tenderloins by ear tag. So we have total transparency. That's why we're able to pick out the ribeye for the competition, which is unique, because you go to another a plant and they're just like, well, they're all fabbed together. You can like grade them and then they can be put in a grade, but they're not going to be like individually. So
Yeah.
imagine that carcass that we were talking about, to loop back to the beginning of our call, which is that really high 66%. Well, all of that stuff got boxed, like the tri-tips, the rounds, the knuckles, together with the rest of the fab. So as we all know, like the tri-tip on that animal, which would have been really small because it was a pretty small carcass, would have been something you'd have had raw probably, like, and not in a 2 pound increment.
Yeah.
So even within our own company, I think that we need to do a better job of utilizing those cuts I was talking about, because the American system as it is doesn't account for it as well as Japan or even Southeast Asia utilization of those hind quarter cuts, which they find a lot of quality in. And I've even heard about producers in like Australia, for example, that have taken cattle. So we feed to 28 months. We can get into the production side a little bit more, but we feed to like 28, 30 months, and that's like where we slaughter the animals at.
Yeah.
I've heard about producers taking them to 36 months just to get the marbling to manifest, because they put fat on top to bottom, front to rear, to manifest in the top round, the bottom round, because they were getting so much value for those cuts in like the Asian trade. We're not
Yeah.
doing that. We're taking it to a logical endpoint for ribeye or a strip that makes sense for an American consumer, not really considering how marbled the top round or eye round might be.
Oh.
I'm a
Well,
big braised guy.
Yeah,
yeah.
Oh, dude, and it's getting cold and rainy over here in Seattle. It's
definitely.
yeah.
So
Um,
how do you use the round, Tyler?
there's so many ways, like um, eating it raw, like you said, which means
Yeah,
shaving it super thin, shabu shabu kind of style, or even just like a really Tremont, like salty, maybe a little bit of soy, something like that. There's so many different things, but they're in the rear. There's so many rad cuts of for braising
Mm-hmm.
because even on the Wagyu, the leaner end of the animal, which is the round, but those braises are luscious. They're like
Yeah.
long, slow roasties. Oh,
I
so
know
good.
you're the roasty guy, man. That we don't get into a lot of roasts, but we should talk more about roast because that's
yeah.
especially nowadays, man. But yeah, you can really utilize that, that eye of round too, man. We always talk about making the best roast beef, man. That makes the best freaking roast beef, that eye of round, man.
So good.
Anytime. Yeah.
We introduced a handle on like shank, so a bone-in shank that's like French, sort of like a tomahawk.
Oh
Some
yeah.
Yeah.
people call it like a Thor's hammer,
Horse
and
ham.
that goes super good on like a Traeger, like a smoking situation. So we've definitely done like a lot of R&D, and we don't sell anything like thin sliced package. I think that's like something that other people have done better than we have, probably, because I think that is a big opportunity, like you were saying, Tyler, in terms of like shabu shabu or
Yeah.
yakiniku. But in Japan, they'll have whole sets that might cost like $150 that
Yeah.
are just like
Yes.
shin,
Yep.
and it's not even the prime cuts. The prime cuts would cost you a couple $100. So it's like
Yeah.
you take a step down and then another step down, and then you're an American beef. So they have American beef, which is always like the baseline set. It's like
Yeah.
$50, which I had when I was a student. I was like basically a student when I lived there. I was a teacher, so I didn't have a lot of money. So I rarely had actual Wagyu when I
Yeah.
was there because it's so expensive, and it's become even more expensive. So yeah, that's going to be like, that's the future, is for sure utilization, and not just how we can consume a ribeye better.
Yeah.
We figured that out at this point. I think it's more about the rest of the animal. And it was so great to have Dr. Bass at
Yeah.
the festival, at the conference.
Yeah.
He brought the festival energy, and
You did.
yeah, he's a NorCal guy like me, so we had some shared friends and roots. But what an incredible guy, and people like that we need to put them in front of a lot of more people than they're in front of now, because
Absolutely.
he could really bring it for. Imagine like having an event where actual consumers could see him break down carcass as opposed to a bunch of beef people.
Right.
That'd
Yeah.
be pretty powerful.
He was
I can
he was
only imagine how awesome his classroom is because
Oh my
he's
oh,
gosh.
he's such
such
a
a
great
fun,
teacher.
energetic, silly, like he's having fun up there. Dude. He loves it, right?
Oh
Well,
yeah.
when I first started at Lone Mountain, we supported the CIA at Hyde Park with like a meat donation,
Yeah.
and we were sending like all of our flat irons to them for the students to fabricate.
Oh,
And I
no.
was like, I said, I
Oh,
love the CIA, no shade at
Yeah.
all, incredible culinary institute. But we are not doing that anymore because we cannot afford not to sell the flat irons. And can you imagine the students in there?
I know. I
Oh
Oh,
can't.
missed a little bit of the, but
No.
it is it is important for them to real world do this stuff. And it sounds like Dr. Bass has that in his meat science classes for sure. But it's like, it must be difficult to source enough product for people to really train on. I guess journeyman butchers are probably where you're going to get the best training, because you have like so much opportunity to cut meat that you're going to sell. Did either one of you guys go to culinary school, or is that
I
part of
did.
your heritage? Oh, you did? Nice.
I've been chefing. I mean, if you want to say I started at Burger King when I was 14, that's not really.
Wow.
Chef
Um,
at Burger King.
yeah. So I went to culinary school in '97 in Portland, Oregon, and
Nice.
I've been cooking professionally since I was like 16. I'm not going to tell you how old I just turned. I don't want to date myself,
Well,
but
you're pretty close to me, it sounds like, based on your years of culinary school. Um, but I do think that like that my colleague Griff Foxley, who was the COO at the time and is Bob's son-in-law and his family business, you know, their thinking was we need to invest in CIA. We needed to invest in the next generation of chefs because when they were starting out, they were coming up across, some places knew about it. Like, for example, like Alexander's Steakhouse in San Francisco is like a pretty famous like Wagyu steakhouse in the country. Well, they know about it, but other places didn't know, and so their thought was like we need to penetrate the education world so that
Yeah.
people and I would love to see what they're teaching when they get to meet at like CIA at Hyde Park or at culinary schools around the country because if there's not a division a chapter about beef breeds or about what these breeds manifest in terms of food, then they need to catch up with that, I think, because it's a huge part of the culinary world,
you're
obviously.
you're 100% spot on because I mean, even back when I was in culinary school, it was just cow, lamb,
Yeah,
chicken, pork,
right.
not like this is a 15, 16th, red wattle, Dorade cross. Like people are, what? Like that's
Yeah,
almost an expansion school idea at that point because, most of these kids that are going in there maybe have a year or maybe two under their belt and working the pantry station at Applebee's or whatever.
right.
Um, it's pretty basic knowledge at the beginning, lots of 101. And I think there's a huge opportunity for what you said, actually teaching breeds, teaching the science, teaching how, the history, how we got to where we are. I think because that's super fun for me. And I'm still teaching myself all that stuff still because I'm interested in it. And
Yeah,
I like the story. Like I love Jerry. Listening to his stories are super fun. Uh,
amazing.
yeah,
What a resource. What a guy.
Yeah.
amazing.
What a storyteller. Like the stories just come alive. Every time I talk with Jerry and sitting around you know, a courtyard fire pit at whatever convention we're at, I just get taken there. And it's such a amazing person, amazing family to have involved. But I think that all points towards like the old adage that like travel is like the best form of education. So
Yep.
this is what chefs learn a lot. I think when they stage and they go to different places in the world, is like what ingredients are they working with, and invariably like protein, seafood. Those are the kind of things that are going to come up like whoa, like eyes opened. Like if you go to Italy and you see like the kind of beef that they're consuming, like in Florence or whatever, it's going to be like that's the complete opposite of Wagyu.
So crazy.
And yeah, it's so crazy, like so blue and like devoid of fat. And some people really like that, other people don't. It's definitely more divisive than Wagyu. But it's an education, and you get to see like how people consume it differently. They do like super thick, big chops that are like basically raw. Like this all with an intention of like it being the best experience. But I will say that as someone who has worked for equal times now in first the grass-fed space and then now in the full-blood Wagyu space, I get so much less feedback and grief. I have once the beef is at the distributor with the Wagyu, I I'm worry free because it's going to work for the restaurant or the restaurateur, the chef, and the grass fed people were really trying. And I'm not saying the grass fed beef's not good. I think grass fed beef can be fantastic. I've been to Argentina. I've had some of the best grass based beef I think you can get. There's really great products out there. But the variability is challenging, and the expectation of what people are hoping for when they go to it's Friday night. They're going into a restaurant. They're going to order a $45, $50, $60 steak, and then it's like kind of tough. That's not going to work so well. So I do think that like the user friendly aspect of Wagyu makes it super like deployable in a lot of different environments. And the fact that people like it. So
Yeah.
as a person who's worked, and I know you guys have worked in the whole protein space. I'm sure you've had similar experiences where it can be super dynamic and awesome with grass finished beef, but then it can be super disappointing, and it's like that's hard, especially if it's
Yeah.
like livery. That's like none of those things come
Yeah.
across well.
Yep.
You know what?
Sharp.
I love that
Literally.
that Wagyu grass fed. We had some Wagyu grass fed out
Mm,
of Olympia, Washington, Chehalis, I believe, and it was awesome. Like
Really good.
it was
Yeah,
rad. It was tender. That's what it was, and it wasn't obviously as marbled as a full blood ribeye or
right.
anything like that, but it was still pretty marbled. It was very
Mhm.
tender, and it was cool, and it was a great. He always says it's a beef for a different day. Like there's so many different styles of
Yeah,
wagyu, but that was an interesting one. I was like, I'd put that on my rotation, man. That was
that's
delicious,
cool.
but I do want it to be tender, and the wagyu breed is tender, so there you go.
Well, have you guys heard of First Flight? It's a grass-fed Wagyu that's produced at scale. It comes from New Zealand. And I just bring them up because it's been going on maybe for about the same time that I've been at Lone Mountain. And in like a 10-year period, they've created a whole category at the grocery store that is an F1 Holstein Wagyu cross that's grass fed. So a retailer can say, this is grass fed and it's Wagyu. So they can do like the two birds, one stone thing.
Yeah.
And it's also like a way that they can monetize like beef calves from the dairy industry, which is the main industry in New Zealand.
Yep.
And I'm like, this is genius. Like, and I think there's been companies that have tried to do it with like Jersey cattle in the US, and I'm not sure like to what extent they've been successful, but there is a real opportunity to find niches within the niche, and grass-fed could be one of them. It's never been something we wanted to pursue because Bob has just been like so focused on the Japanese heritage of it and doing everything to manifest the like genetic potential the greatest, and that comes from a cereal-based diet. But I do see that there's a consumer for like grass-based Wagyu, or I think specifically like in Wagyu cross cattle. It's more interesting because like of the late maturing kind of elements of Wagyu cattle compared to early maturing breeds. Since if you can kind of combine that and hit that sweet spot, that'd be pretty cool.
We,
Yeah.
we gotta have some New Zealand and Australian Wagyu people on here because honestly, I'm gonna say it. I'm just not a big fan of a lot of the stuff that comes out here from New Zealand and Australia because it just seems like it's made for grocery stores. It's like almost like what you said. It's marketable and like that is super marketable, but something like marketable doesn't mean that it's great, or good quality either. But I don't think I've tried this one, but I would like to learn a little bit more about how it gets over here and everything like that because I feel like I'm never super impressed. There's a couple like that stone axe out of
Mhm. Yeah,
Australia. That was great. We were like, fuck, that's great. But there's a lot of other stuff that I don't know. I mean, I hate saying it. I'm not like, oh, only American beef, but
right.
like, didn't really enjoy it that much.
Yeah.
So I don't know I don't know why it's different. Maybe it's just the different terroir over there. Maybe it's just not my flavor profile. I'll say that, but I don't know. I want to learn more about it.
There's like some awesome, definitely some really awesome beef produced in Australia. I've had it. I've been to the conference, and we utilize a lot of genetics from there, and we have some great friends that are seed stock producers, and their like supply chains are a little bit more evolved. I would say. I mean, I don't want to like, denigrate the U.S. at all, but it's they're an export country, so they're really set up for it. So I would actually probably make some hypotheses around this, which is that it's really fitting in more with like our conventional beef in some ways. So when you say it's like reminds you of like supermarket beef, it's like, well, why would they sell the super premium for like F1 discounted pricing in the US if they can put in their kind of average Wagyu, right? So their average Wagyu, I think, a lot of times ends up over in the US because of the strength of the dollar and because of the consumer that's looking for that kind of average experience compared to like Korea or even Japan, where they might sell like some of their higher end stuff. Um, so I would agree with you that a lot of it has not been overwhelming to me in terms of the quality, but I think that there's a lot of reasons why. And it's not because they don't have like fantastic beef. They have really fantastic Wagyu, but not
Yeah,
all of it's fantastic, right? And so I think a lot of the less fantastic comes to the US. Maybe
that's
unfortunately, maybe fortunately for us, because like
totally.
we know our competition a little bit more. But I also think it's the same thing again, back to wine. Like if you thought that Australian wine was what you got at Fred Meyer, like let's say in the Northwest,
Yellowtail.
yeah, but when you go there, like I had the
Yes.
opportunity to do, you're like, holy cow, there's like so much great wine here. Never had any of it, right? Because like very little of it outside like Penfolds ends up in the US. And that's just like the segmentation of the market. It's a global, they have a very global kind of orientation with their. They have like less people in California, and they produce as much beef for export to the U.S. as they consume domestically. You guys wrap their head around that. That's just for the U.S. That's not even like counting Taiwan, China, which they're basically taking over the U.S. market because of our feud with China. They're gonna, they're picking up that business in China that we had. So, and then we have a complete dearth, and you guys heard about it so much. Go to that conference and the gentleman from AgriBeef that gave such a great presentation about how low the cattle numbers are. Go to the NCBA. This like echo chamber of it's like we don't have enough cattle, right? So there's going to continue to be more imported beef until the herd rebuilds more or we figure something out. And I would say that we shouldn't, as a group, we should maybe embrace it more than demonize it, because if we were going to like have a source of beef outside the country that's not Canada and Mexico maybe, then you would say that Australia, Japan would be like pretty good trading partners for that. You'd have,
For sure.
science is good, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like we're actually exploiting them in some ways, by getting their beef for like the good price. Because it's like people want more beef, right?
Yeah. No, totally. I think you nailed it. Like, you're right. It is a lot of the stuff that is coming over. They're better at exporting and marketing their beef and getting it into those grocery
Yeah.
stores than the U.S. is. So, because that's really when we bring over like a specific breed, a specific one like the Stone Axe. I was like, yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
But I guess in just from like a normal perspective of like walking around in grocery stores and seeing Wagyu, that's all that I see is basically a lot of it's Australian,
Really? Yeah.
a lot of it is, not everywhere, but I see it more so. And so I think that like the American consumer is seeing that and going, oh, okay, like that's what Wagyu is. And me being a Wagyu snob, I've had some of it. I bought it a few different places, and I'm like, gosh, it's just like it tastes kind of just like like grocery
Kind of
store
like
meat.
fine. Yeah.
Yeah, like it wasn't great, and I was just like,
Yeah.
I just don't want that to be people's experience because we've
Right.
had great stuff,
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just don't, I don't. I wish it wasn't just about the marketing and the exporting sometimes, but that's
Right.
what this world is. So I just want people to to
Yeah.
source better, to go out there and talk to these butchers. That's what we always talk about, right? Know where your meat comes from and
It's
source
huge for
and
us.
understand and know the story behind it, because that means a lot to a lot of people, and know that it's well raised.
Right. No, that's interesting. No, and I couldn't agree with you more across the board on all that. And I've had a similar experience. Although there was one butcher that I went into in Southern California that only does Australian Wagyu, because I think that he was kind of forgotten about by some of like the bigger, let's just call them the bigger Wagyu companies or whatever. And he kind of felt left out in the cold, and he was sort of embraced by the food service distribution world. I think it was just a smaller butcher shop, and he has only Australian Wagyu, really high end stuff, nice stuff. And I thought that's interesting. In the 10 years that I've been working in this business, we went from like American Wagyu is really great, maybe not a standard, but really good, to a guy who's like, I will not buy American. And I thought, how did this happen? And then again, it's kind of down to the marketing and the whole experience. So I will say this, that I think that for the most part, the Australian product kind of fits in with what we're doing, not what necessarily what Lone Mountain's doing, but what we're doing as a greater industry. Well, I couldn't agree with you more, Evan, that a lot of times it hasn't really like sang or like really hit at home in terms of being like, wow, this is amazing, but that it's kind of not denigrating, the Wagyu experience either. So maybe somewhere in between. But yeah, like big distributors, like Chef's Warehouse, Cisco, US Foods, they're getting a lot of calls for Wagyu. And if I don't have the beef, and Imperial doesn't have the beef or Snake River doesn't have the beef, they're going to still find Wagyu somewhere, right? So I guess that's where they fit in still, because we don't have the scale to like, fill the niche.
Get it? I get it. Yeah. Well, that makes sense. Now that makes sense. So, hey, before we get into a lightning round here, let me ask you what your biggest Wagyu myth is. What's the funniest myth you've ever heard, and how do you debunk it?
I think that it's maybe a misunderstanding more than a myth, which is that like when like Angus cattlemen or cattlemen that I grew up with, they see the pictures of what we're putting with our marketing materials, they go, ugh. so much fat. Like that's too much, right? And it's just like, no, it's not too much. It's great, actually. This is like what we're trying to introduce. And if you thought about it down the chain as that this is going to be a bull that's used on your Angus cows, you would want them to have as much marbling as possible. So I think that the idea that we're like going after marbling too much, or there's already enough marbling in the breed, we don't need more. Not right. It's a myth. We can do better. We've learned that from Australia. Going back to Australia again, that they've gotten better. Their competition, by the way, their association deal is crazy. It's tons of categories: F1, purebred, full-blood, what days on feed, all these different things. So it's pretty interesting. And then the other one is the phenotype of the cattle. People look at them and they're like, oh, couldn't have that out in the front pasture. And that's just more of a pride or
Yeah.
just kind of an ego thing. And it's like, you got to look past what you learned an animal should look like. Because one of the things someone told me early on was like, the ugliest Wagyu is going to produce like the best steak. Now, I don't know if that's entirely true, but it's like, if you kind of see a really heavy fronted with this, the small rear end, like the kind of typical, maybe the silhouette from like the breed industry, or a lot of brands. It's funny because like we have like these, the more we make them like Angus, which is where most of our eyes are trained, the
Yeah.
further we're going to get away from like what actually matters. So I think it would be focusing on data and on what's really happening on the rail, and not so much on which one you like, how it looks the best. I mean, is our phenotypic like judging important? Yes. Are feet and legs important? Absolutely. Well, guess what? They've almost all of them have good udders. They don't make a lot of milk, but they're not going to like have mastitis. So we're like not as bad off, but we do need to select for more milk, which is I don't know if you guys know this, but there's like some traits that are non-corollary. So like marbling and milk are kind of have opposite correlation. So as you get more marbling, the milk tends to go down. So we do need to kind of like balance that and find cattle that can do it all. But those are the two things. The marbling and the steak being, oh, that's so bad, or that's just gets back to the demonization of fat. And the
Yeah.
further we get away from that, the better.
Yeah.
Yeah. The demonization of fat. I absolutely agree. Well, let's do a quick lightning round here. I'm gonna ask you, Reid, first, and then Tyler second here. Okay. So quickly here, first thing comes to mind. Favorite Wagyu cut, Reid?
The one that always comes to my mind is bavette. I had this experience where it was super just fluffy. I call a steak fluffy. It was crazy. So bavette, but it's not. It's I guess it's just based on that one experience. It just took me to another place.
Nice.
Flat iron.
Tyler goes flat iron. Yes,
I'm
of
pretty
course.
high on the flat iron right now.
Yeah,
So beefy.
I got it's good.
so tender.
The
All
chop
right.
flavor.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're cooking your bavette, what's your go-to cooking method?
Charcoal. I have a big green egg here. I kind of live in Southern California, and I got a Weber kettle there. Super simple. Lump charcoal, never briquettes.
Yeah, lump charcoal. Okay, and so you're doing big green eggs. So you don't got to worry too much about it over flaming and everything like that, right?
Just as long as you have enough distance between your element and the steak, you're gonna be fine. But I love charcoal with the beef, and there's tons of ways you can do it, but charcoal is my favorite.
Yeah, nice.
I'm gonna grill it too.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
the flat iron. You're asking me how I'm gonna cook my flat iron?
yeah.
Pan sear.
You
Pan
pants
sear.
searing. Yeah,
And that muscle, there's a few particular muscles on the animal that it's almost like when you put a crispy skinned fish in the pan, it curls up real quick and tightens.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
gotta really kind of relax and baby it a little bit so you get that real good hard crusty sear on the side.
yeah.
Dude, cast iron, carbon, or stainless.
Cast iron.
Okay.
Yeah,
So many options. Where everyone's such a geek about the gear now. That's like fun. I think that the one place that the consumer is really excited is like the gear. Everyone wants the gear. So like cast iron pans must have gone through the roof recently.
Actually seared us up a ribeye from Dr. Sheila last
Nice.
week. And I left my cast iron at home, so it was stainless steel that day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Making me hungry.
It was still good.
Talking about a Vermont steak. That sounds pretty delicious.
It was damn good.
I did that. Tyler, you're just talking about. I did the Terrace Major last night in my cast iron, and yeah, it kind of
Yep, that muscle will
tightens
tighten
up.
up too. Yep.
Same
Yeah,
phenomenon.
that one tightened up. I know. I love that one, man. Okay. Ooh, this one might be difficult. If you could only eat one Wagyu dish for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Ooh, that's tough. I think that if I'm gonna kind of combine two things, like tartar and like a nigiri style with like again the rice, something that's like tataki, basically like just very rare and a little bit grilled. But I love the raw texture of the beef, and I think it's just so delicious. So it's kind of a weird thing to eat over and over again, but maybe too rich. But I would love that.
Nice. Tyler, same question.
To go back to that dish I made the other day, that's pretty up there. Just a
Flat iron.
super hard crusty sear, old school on a ribeye,
I'll agree with
sauteed mushrooms, thyme, caramelized onions, just like hella decadent, old school kind of French
Decadent.
dish.
Yeah.
I think that maybe even with
That,
like
Yeah.
that was decadent.
I need to add like a soft scrambled egg to it just because I'm such a
that.
Dude, oh my God.
I, I, I think your flat iron should be like honorable mention in this category because sliced over a salad, like make a bowl out of it. Like the
so
flat
versatile.
iron is so versatile, yeah.
So
And
versatile.
also that combination of the ribeye and the chuck kind of flavor kind of coming
Mhm.
together and then tender. So I like
Mhm.
your, I think your choice, Tyler, for your favorite steak is a good one. I
Yeah,
support.
I love
Endorse.
that one. I love that one.
Love it. All right. So, craziest or most unexpected Wagyu dish you've ever seen or tried, like tacos, pizza, sushi, dessert.
Um, I'm gonna say the chulatone that me and my buddy Dan tried to take down in Chicago. And as you guys know, Tyler is a chef. Like whenever the vendor comes in, you always get like we styled out or whatever you want to call it. And so they just got us like this really thick, super crazy marbled chulatone. It was just me and my friend, and it was hard for us. Yeah, it was challenging, but it was so good, and everything was so good. We could have just used you guys to be at the table and maybe one more.
Please.
That would have been better.
Yeah.
So that's probably one of my craziest experiences with Wagyu.
So, that's the big bone in ribeye, right?
The big bone-in strip, actually.
Strip. Okay.
Yeah, and imagine off of a beef animal like the one you guys tasted from our farm, from our ranch. That's what it was like, but it was like 15 ounces maybe. Um, oh, and I do have to give like a shout out to my coworker Sid, who coined the term Wagyu wasted because at the ranch we would order these different A5 steaks and then we would try them and do side by sides. There would be like three or four of us, and it would be like, whoa, we each had like a 14 ounces of Wagyu or whatever, and you just be like, oh my god, I'm done. Bring your friends when you're doing large amounts of Wagyu, because if it's only a few of you to take down, you might get Wagyu wasted. So that's another kind of crazy experience.
You wasted,
I
man.
need t-shirts for the
You got to share,
Well,
man.
you have to talk to her about that because I think she's got the term coined, but
Yeah,
it's pretty funny.
I always say it's like a weed brownie, man. You can't eat the whole thing. You got to share it. Share it with your
be
friend.
careful.
Yeah, no, it was a fun memory, and there's just nothing better than sharing it with friends and being in a special place doing it. So I was thinking about that.
What about you, Tyler? Craziest or most unexpected Wagyu dish you've ever seen?
Um, this was when I was a youngster in Los Angeles. The chef I was staging for took me out after my stage. I was there for about 4 months and worked for free every goddamn day. So by the time I was done, he took me out for dinner to this really nice place. I think it was at Patina. I can't remember exactly, but it was like a raw, thin sliced piece of Wagyu over like a warm, like butter poached piece of lobster, like a whole surf and turf
Wow.
thing.
Ooh.
That sounds crazy.
As a 4 or 5 year old kid, my mind was
I will eat nothing better than this for the rest of my life. Dang, dude. I love that. Dude, that sounds good.
How fortunate.
Yeah, right? I mean, god
That's
damn.
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, here, last question here. Your dream Wagyu dinner guest. If you could serve steak to anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
I keep coming back to the same person, which is I think a little bit goofy, but I feel like Benjamin Franklin would be cool to enjoy Wagyu steak with, because he was
Yeah,
like all about going to France, and like there's been a lot of reporting
yeah,
about how he was a little bit more gluttonous, like maybe we are, and
yeah.
enjoyed a nice wine. And I just
And
think he was
be
super smart too, and like really visionary in his era. And so if he was like, this exists, I think
yeah,
it would be like, wow, I want that all the time. And so I think
yeah.
it'd be a cool hang to it.
That yeah, man. Think of Ben Franklin. Wagyu with Ben Franklin.
Yeah.
Oh, what
You
about
know
you,
my
Tyler?
you know my answer.
You say Bourdain?
Yep.
Yeah,
I yeah.
Anytime anybody asks me the perfect dinner guest and who you want to sit next to and talk to, that's the one. Because he would get controversial for all of it, and those are the kind of conversations that I like to have, really.
I'd love to hear
Definitely.
I'd love to hear what he thinks about American Wagyu, man. At this point of where it's at right now, I'd love to know that. You know, see,
That's interesting because I thought about Bourdain obviously because he's such a big, part of our culture and part of our food culture. And for my kind of bachelor party, we went to Montreal, and my best man, he kind of sorted out all the restaurants that Anthony went to, and we went to this one called Pied de Cochon, which is where he almost got like died from overdosing on foie gras, and we
I've
did the
been there.
same thing. Yeah, it's amazing, such an
I've
amazing
been there.
thing.
wow,
I wonder though for Bourdain if we would maybe be in like a post Wagyu world for him, where it's like he was so cool and like where he would just like, you know what, Wagyu's over for me. Like I don't know, like probably not because it's like the quality pervades, but
yeah.
he kind of like was the chef where like the fillet hate the fillet, and so yeah, I think he would love it still though. Great choice.
I
Good
love it.
conversation for sure.
Yeah,
Definitely. So
yeah.
sad that we don't have him anymore.
I
No.
know. God, man, for real. Well, guys, on that note, what else are we missing about Wagyu? Any final thoughts?
I just think that the future is limitless with the breed. I think it's super encouraging how much people are still interested in beef as like a part of their diet, and I don't think that's going away. So I feel like just really fortunate to be a part of something that I love. It's been a part of my life for 44 years, and shout out to my parents and my lifestyle judging coaches and all the FFA people through the years, and all of that education and set me up for doing something that's like my dad when they bought a ranch adjoining to ours growing up, but they it kind of bootstrapped them so they weren't able to afford to go on trips, and we never really traveled because we had a dairy anyways. So, but he said it was like vacation and work all rolled in one by buying that adjoining place, and we enjoyed it a lot growing up. And my career has been like a passion and a vocation that have come together in a way that I couldn't have imagined. And all of what I've done to this point has gotten me to where I am, and I'm so like grateful to the people that helped me get to where I've gotten, and I'm so excited about the breed and moving things forward in any way we can.
Lucky.
Dude, I love it, man. And hey,
Yeah.
that's a good reason why, Lone Mountain won the best Wagyu steak in America at the American Wagyu Association Conference,
It was
because
beautiful.
all that work went into it, man. And it's really cool to hear your story, Reid, and talk with you and know kind of your background and I really enjoyed that you went to Japan. You've kind of seen a lot of different Wagyu, you had a lot of different Wagyu experiences, man. And you can tell when talking to you, when we met you there at the conference, I was like, yeah, dude, this guy's been around. This guy knows what's up. He's been doing his Wagyu thing. He knows about meat. He knows kind of about everything about it. So I thought that was cool, man. I think you'd be a cool guy to hang out with at our Wagyu dinner too, man. I'd love to
Yep.
enjoy
I'm down
some.
with that
Let's
as
make
well.
it happen.
Cool.
I know we do, man. We got
Am
to
I
do it
We'll have
cooking or
before,
are we going out?
huh?
Yeah, and if you ever come to LA, yeah, we work with this restaurant called River in Venice that does our beef. That's really awesome. It's like a Japanese kind of fusion izakaya type restaurant on Abbot Kinney, and then also Santa Fe Market Steer. I guess the kids call it like day one. They're like our day one. They've my day one. They're not Lone Mountain's day one, but my day one. I've worked with Kathleen, and they were a beer nominee for the Southwest, and I would love to share some revelry, some wine, some beef out. I mean, it'd be fun to do it in the backyard. Nothing
Absolutely.
better than that. But let's go see some of our friends in the culinary world. Let's get them on with you.
Yeah,
Because I think that If there's one thing that I would like to see more of in the American Wagyu community is more involvement from chefs and from restaurateurs, because they're not really represented to the extent that they should be at our conference, I don't think. And that's no one's fault. It's just like where we are. But like, let's get them in there. I think that they're such an important part of all this.
The chef that I staged for in LA back in the day was Josiah Citron from
Oh yeah,
Melise.
I know him. Yes,
Yeah.
great guy.
We still keep in contact.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
He's a
No,
wild
that's
man.
dope.
Yeah, he knows about. See, that's really so interesting to talk to someone like that, because he goes back to like kind of contraband Wagyu that was like when the border was shut, the fish vendor would have it, and there's so much history. And I know that there's some people within the industry that are trying to put together that kind of that book, and I think it's really a noble kind of endeavor for sure to write it down. There's so much to it. So
He's
Yeah,
always
dude.
gonna
Chef
want to go.
Josiah was part of it. Yeah, part of the
That's
history.
cool. That'd be cool. We do need more stuff like that in the Wagyu world. Just the experiences, the books,
Absolutely.
the podcasts, just the educational. I think that aspect is needs to grow, man, every single day. But you're right. Let's get some chefs, man. Let's talk to more chefs. Talk about how they prepare it, because that, like we talked about, that's a huge thing on how your experience is going to end up. And so
Definitely.
I agree with that. Well, we got to get down there, man. We'll get down to LA, soon.
Get down to
and
LA, get down to New Mexico. If you're ever in New Mexico, you're always welcome on the ranch. We'd love to have you guys.
That would be dope.
Love
Yeah,
to.
that would be dope. We got to do that, man. We'll take you up on that.
Totally.
Well, thank you, Reid. I appreciate you, man. We appreciate you so much. This has been great.
You got it. I've really appreciated you guys, and I thank you for what you do for the industry. And I think this is great. I love podcasts, and I know a lot of people, they just put the AirPods in and really tune in. So
Listen,
thanks
man.
for tuning in, and keep listening to the Meat Dudes.
All right.
You heard it, man. Well, congratulations again, Reid. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Later.